Shalom, brothers and sisters. This is Dr. William Schnoebelen coming to you from With One Accord Ministries, and we have today a teaching on spiritual warfare, actually more specifically on how not to do spiritual warfare. We're talking about exorcism. And, this is a big buzzword, it has been ever since the creepy, horrible movie came out, in 1973, The Exorcist. And I used to be an exorcist. I used to, do the whole thing with the holy water and the stole and, all of that stuff. And that's why this teaching is called Confessions of an Exorcist, because I want people to understand that you don't want to be an exorcist. You don't want to call an exorcist. You don't want to call what you do. If you're in a ministry of casting out devils, you don't want to call yourself an exorcist, because it's not a good thing. And again, if at first you don't succeed, read the book. Before I get into that, though, I want to tell a couple of accounts. These are true stories. The first time I ever was involved in doing an exorcism, it didn't go well. Some of you may know I was a Catholic seminarian. I was ordained to the priesthood in the old Roman Catholic Church back in the mid-1970s. And I had the opportunity to go through what is called the minor orders and the major orders of the Catholic Church. All of this has changed now since Vatican II, but I was part of a more traditional branch of the Catholic Church at that time. And anyway, so I was an ordained exorcist. The minor orders are porter, lector, exorcist, and acolyte. And the major orders, and this was in the old days again, are subdeacon, deacon, and priest. Well, when I was a deacon, I was involved in trying to do an exorcism on a woman, with helping out a priest. And the priest was literally, it took days. The woman, this was in a hospital, Catholic hospital with nuns, being there to make sure everything was kosher. Anyway, and because of the way they do the exorcism ritual, the priest would over and over again, and here, this is it. This is a real book of exorcism. This is part of the Roman ritual. This is, again, the old edition, not the new one. The priest was killed by the demon in the middle of the exorcism, horribly killed. And that's because you don't want to do an exorcism. Honestly, you don't. And I'll tell you, people will say, oh, well, that's because it was a Catholic priest and he wasn't saved. Well, I don't know. I mean, there are Catholic priests that are probably genuinely saved, but of course, obviously, most of them are not. But the point is, if he's an ordained exorcist, it should still work according to the theology behind exorcism. Now, me personally, I was involved in an exorcism where a woman came to us, and the devils were literally trying to kill her. She was in a bar, not a good beginning, and she felt these demons come into her from another person in the bar. That's why we recommend nobody goes into taverns or bars or places like that, because they're crawling with evil spirits. And this woman is driving to get to us, and literally the demons are trying to make her, as she was driving, go off the road and into another lane of traffic and be killed. And we had to literally drag her up the stairs, kicking and screaming. And, I put on the stole and the whole thing and the holy water and went through all, and it didn't work. For hours and hours and hours, it didn't work. And finally, we just gave up on this, And that's why if you read about exorcisms, and even most of the movies that are made by Hollywood, you will see that in many cases they fail. People get killed. Sometimes the subject, you know, the woman or the man who's supposedly possessed, gets killed. You know, and it's because it's not effective. Let me take you to the Bible now and explain what's going on. Because people go and they say, oh, well, you know, it says right here in the Bible, you know, exorcism, blah, blah, blah. Well, let's read. Because, again, like I keep telling people, if first you don't succeed, read the directions. So this is the only place in the entire Scriptures that exorcism is mentioned. The word exorcist, okay? And, you know, we're in Acts chapter 19. And in verse 13, and this is in the middle of, you know, Paul's ministry, and it says, then certain of the vagabond Jews, exorcists, took upon them to call over them which had evil spirits in the name of Adon Yahushua, saying, we adjure you by Yahushua, whom Paul preacheth. And there were 7 sons of one Sceva, a Jew and chief of the priests, which did so. And the evil spirit answered and said, Yahushua I know, and Paul I know, but who are ye? And the man in whom the evil spirit was leaped on them, and overcame them, and prevailed against them, so that they fled out of that house, naked and wounded. And this was known to all the Jews and Greeks also dwelling at Ephesus, and fear fell on them all, and the name of Adon Yahushua was magnified. Okay, now, here's the thing. You need to understand that exorcism is not a biblical practice. I mean, yes, you certainly see people, especially Yahushua, casting demons out of people. That's inarguable. But you cannot find the word exorcism or exorcist applied to Yahushua or applied to any other biblical person, not Paul, not Peter, not James or John. None of them ever are recorded to have done an exorcism. Now, why is that? You need to understand, like so many things, the background. Back in those days, there were, as it says, vagabonds. There were traveling itinerant magicians that would walk around the countryside in Judea and in the Galilee, you know, so on, claiming to have the power to cast out devils. This is incontrovertible. Now, we see this word in here in Acts 19:13, and what does it mean? Well, the word in Greek is exorcistis, and it basically means a spell or a conjuring, someone who binds someone with an oath or a spell. This isn't sounding good, not one bit. And the problem is, it basically, and from Strong says it can mean someone who's a conjurer. An exorcist could be, now what's a conjurer? Well, a conjurer is a magician, a sorcerer. Now let me show you one other word here. If you look in the Scripture, what did these guys say? We adjure thee by Yahushua whom Paul preacheth. Okay, now what's interesting is, and I realize probably virtually nobody who's listening to this used to be a magician, a sorcerer, but I was. For 16 years, I was a ceremonial magician and an occultist and a witch. And adjure is a magical term. It's a term that's used all the time when you're doing ceremonial magic. I adjure you, blah, 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 you know, and it's very much, and I'm not saying it is by its very nature an occult term, but it certainly is a word that's heavily associated with the occult. Now, here's the bottom line. Exorcism is an occult ritual. So I would never, ever call myself an exorcist. And someone who does, and I realize there are dozens and dozens, some people very prominent, that are calling Christian ministers. Because you might say, well, these were Jews. These aren't saved individuals, and that's true. But the point is, even saved individuals, if you're trying to do an exorcism, you're going to run into trouble. We have a methodology that we recommend, and we're not saying it's the only true way to do deliverance, but we have found it to be enormously effective since 1988, 89, when he started doing deliverance. Thousands of people have been set free. Our methodology is in Blood on the Doorpost, our kind of flagship book for spiritual warfare and deliverance. We have the prayers that we lead people through on our website for free download. And the problem is the whole exorcism thing has permeated Christianity to the point that people okay, like, let me give you some examples. There are instructions in this book. And one of the things, and this is a terrible thing to do, but and again, people that started this, and I realize there have been people teaching deliverance for probably at least a century within the evangelical / charismatic movement, and good for them. But on the other hand, they've allowed things from this book, which is not scriptural, to permeate into what they're teaching. And one of the things that's big time error is the idea of demanding that the demon talk to you and tell you literally adjure. And there's rituals in this book. You adjure the demon. You command the demon to tell you in the name of, well, they would say Jesus, how they came into the person and what is the demon's name. They believe that if you don't know the demon's name, you can't get rid of it. That's absolute nonsense, because the Ruach HaKodesh knows what spirit is in there, number one. And number two, we are not to talk to demons, because talking to a demon is a form of what's called necromancy, which is forbidden. Both testaments, both the Torah and the New Testament, forbid you to practice necromancy, sorcery, witchcraft, because you're basically, people need to understand this. When you're talking to a demon, pardon me. Okay, let me back up. People in sorcery believe they can talk to the dead. And we understand from a Christian perspective that's not true. And what they're actually talking with are familiar spirits. So in the same way as that's forbidden, in the same way we're forbidden from talking to demons to get information. So why on earth would you talk to a demon to get information? They're going to lie. There's nothing in the scriptures, number one, it says you're supposed to talk to a demon. Number two, there's nothing in the scriptures that in any way indicates that we have the power to compel a demon to tell the truth. So they lie, because, they serve the devil, who's the father of lies. And that's why in our book, Blood on the Doorpost, which has been out for over 20-some years now, we have, in the book, we repeatedly say, don't get your information from demons, get your information from the Ruach. And that's what we do. We do not ever talk to a demon. If a demon tries to talk to us, we command the demon to shut up in the name of Yahuwah. And so that's the big thing that exorcists and this ritual book have taught people, that number one, you need to talk to the devil. Number two, you need to know the devil's name. No, you don't. The Ruach HaKodesh, the set-apart spirit, will tell you, because believe me, if you go to a magical grimoire, a magical workbook, you'll find hundreds of names of demons, bizarre. I'm not even going to say any of them, but you'll find all these bizarre names of demons. You don't need to know any of that stuff. That's not necessary. We understand, and this again is a diversion from what most people teach, that if you come against a strong man of that is possessing that individual, let's say, for example, a spirit of fear, there's going to be imps or demons under that strong man. And if you cast out the strong man in the name of Yahuwah, the spirit of fear, then all of the little demons that are under that strong man have to go as well. It's like if you capture the king on a chessboard, the game is over. If you take the general out, the war is over. So in the same way, we concentrate our fire on the strong man and take him out by the power of the blood and the cross of Yahuwah, and then everything else has to go. So we don't need to know the names of all of these, because you can literally spend hours and hours and days trying to find all these bizarre names, and it's not necessary. You just command the straw man of the spirit of fear, you know, spirit of whoredoms, whatever it might be, to leave in the name of Yahushua, and they have to leave. It might take some repetition, it might take some perseverance, but typically most deliverances that we do not take more than a couple to 3 hours, and a lot of that time is just spent gathering information from the individual, you know, so we can kind of triage the situation. Whereas with exorcisms, they can take days, they can take weeks, they can take months. There's the most celebrated early case of an exorcism, which was written up in a book called Begone Satan, was in Erling, Iowa, oddly enough, the same state that I'm now living in. Many, many decades ago. I couldn't tell you when. It might be even 100 years ago by now, because I heard about this when I was in grade school as a Catholic young person. And this devil was claiming to be Judas. And supposedly the priest learned that the devil possessed this young woman because her father had cursed her. And that's a very real thing. I mean, that could be, but I don't think it was Judas. And it doesn't matter. And if you read the account of this, it's horrible. It's terrifying. You know, vomiting, a lot of the same thing you see in well, don't see it, but, you know, that you may have heard about in the Exorcist movie. You know, none of that glorifies the Almighty. It just glorifies the devil. So that's why we always pray up front and bind all vain imaginations, manifestations of the devils. We pray to keep the devils from manifesting, because it serves absolutely no purpose for them to do so. We just command them to shut up and get out in the name of Yahushua. So that's why I warn people, if someone says they're an exorcist, be careful, because they may not know what they're doing. Maybe they do, and maybe they're just unlearned about the idea that this isn't really a biblical term, because nowhere, Yahushua was never called an exorcist, Paul isn't, James isn't, or John isn't. And the other thing is that some of these people that say they're exorcists, and I won't say the name, but we've had many people come to us who've been prayed over by these. They charge like $700 or $800 to do an exorcism. And the person ends up more messed up than ever. And brothers and sisters, that is not of Yahuwah. It's not. The bottom line is, we don't do exorcism, we do deliverance. We do liberation through the liberating power of Yahushua HaMashiach, who is Yah, come in the flesh. And we've had a very, very high success rate. You know, probably at least 95, 98% of the people. And I'm not saying any of this to brag on ourselves. It's all Yahushua. And that's why we wrote blood on the doorpost, is we want everybody to understand that if you're a believer, you have the power to cast out devils out of yourself and out of your family and whatever. It's nothing special about us. We're just servants of Yahuwah. And so, we're not exorcists. And as I said, if someone claims to be an exorcist, be careful, because they might not know what they're doing. Okay. Hopefully this has been helpful. Again, if you find these things useful and edifying, please share, please subscribe, and also, again, we are a faith-based ministry, so please pray about supporting our ministry with your love offerings, because we desperately need your help. Thank you so much. Shalom, shalom, and may you be richly blessed.